All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at another one that I've been excited for a while. Today we are looking at Kingdom Leader Class Galvatron. And yeah, this is a pretty nice figure. Here we have Galvatron in his Cybertronian cannon tank sort of mode. I mean, in the show, he only ever just transformed into this like turret and shot, but it's got treads and it's got wheels, so I guess you could say it's a tank. It doesn't really roll very well. The little tank wheels hardly ever roll super well, but this hardly feels like there's anything there at all, which is not too big a deal, but worth noting. He comes with a few accessories here. He comes with the Matrix on a chain here, which is kind of cool. In terms of the Matrix accessory itself, it's a little bit different than the ones we've gotten so far. Here it is with this is the one that came with Optimus, and this is the one that came with Rodimus Prime. So you can see some different stuff there. Obviously, this one is painted opaque with the blue in the middle rather than having the clear plastic center that these two have. The orange on there is a bit more similar to the one that came with Prime rather than the one that came with Hot Rod, or Rodimus Prime rather. And yeah, I mean, it's mostly the same mold. I'd say it's closer to Optimus's than it is to Rodimus's, just because you can see like the opening there is a lot bigger on Galvatron's, and like if you take Rodimus's, it doesn't fit on the peg that this chain goes on at all. Optimus's you can get on there, so it's a bit more similar to that mold. And we can compare those a little bit more later, but just figured I'd show it off with the other versions of the Matrix that we've gotten recently. So yeah, you can just peg it onto this chain here. Obviously, this is really meant to go like around his neck in robot mode, but you can store it in this mode. Pretty much all you do is just loop it over the cannon here, and then there's a little tab right here on the chain that goes into a slot right here, and what will become the robot mode chest, but you can just peg it in like that. So it's kind of looped around the cannon there, and I think that looks kind of cool. I mean, personally, I don't really need to store this in vehicle mode so much, but it does make Galvatron look a little bit more metal to like have that chain coming around his cannon. And then the other accessory that he includes are these two guns. They're really designed to look like the spaceship that Unicron gave Galvatron in the 1986 movie, The Revenge. And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because like I figured that Hasbro was just including these as guns with Galvatron, but really just like making it a way to give you like more little ships to go with like Unicron. How Unicron came with the the Autobot spaceship. But this one doesn't really have any peg holes or anything to attach to that stand. And recently, we've seen images that they're doing another version of this figure that like comes in like crazy sort of like purpley techno colors, like he's being reformatted, and it comes with a number of like little ships and stuff like that. We've seen leaked images of it, and one of them is a smaller version of this, basically. So kind of strange, but yeah, no, they've included two of these so you can use them as handheld guns, and they look kind of cool as guns. They're not really something that I'm gonna really want to keep with Galvatron, because like he's got his cannon, that's all he needs from me. But it's cool that it includes them. You can also peg them together to make them a big sort of launcher, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. If you're ignoring the fact that it definitely just looks like his spaceship, they do make for pretty cool guns. And these also can store in this mode here. They've got these slots up here on both sides. They're just the same piece with like the asymmetrical pegs there, so they can peg together. And then you take these little tabs on the side of the barrel there, and you can just clip these into that. They clip in pretty securely too. So, that's a look. Like, personally, I like the look of the cannon better without those on there, but, it works well enough. At least it doesn't, like, mess with the functionality of the cannon, because now it's just more guns pointed forward. So, yeah, I don't know. They're kind of just, like, all three of these things are just sort of, like, neat extra accessories for me. They're not really something that I'm going to use to display with the figure, but it comes with them, and I do appreciate that. In terms of, like, I guess, posability in this mode, you can't really like adjust the angle of this a whole lot, just because of the way that these work. Like the only way, like you can kind of like bring them further in and then bring the tread further down to adjust the, to make them pointed a little bit further up. But there's not really a great way to like angle these, because when you angle them, you're kind of rotating them in too, so they're now pointing closer together. And then this is like you can kind of bring this back and then bring the this piece down on what will eventually become the ankle tilt. So you can kind of do it, but it's I don't know. It's kind of awkward and counterintuitive in the way that some of the pieces move. So I don't think it looks particularly like good unless you're just like having it pointed stock forward with the treads kind of parallel to each other. But yeah, in terms of other options for this mode, so if you want it to parts form a little bit less, I mean, it still has to parts form to like put the cannon, but you can leave the cannon attached together and peg this in here. I'm not going to do it. I did it once and it's just starting to scrape off the silver paint on that peg. So I don't think it's totally worth it. Like I'm fine with there being, this piece up here. But if you want to do that and you don't care about the silver paint scraping off that peg, like you could have it look like that pretty much, which I think looks a little bit worse. So, I'm going to tend to stick with this orientation, but that is an option. There is a peg there if you want to not split the gun in half. But yeah, in terms of size comparisons, just for a standard one, here he is with the Siege Sideswipe mold, just for a standard figure there. Here he is with Siege Megatron, just because he's another, tank, Cybertronian-ish tank. So you can see what they look like together. And then, last but not least, here he is with his buddies. Here he is with Studio Series 86 Scourge and Kingdom Cyclonus. So you can see how they all look together. And, I feel like that works fairly well. I mean, it doesn't really matter so much how these guys scale, since he just turns into a big cannon. Like, that could be really any size. But, yeah, I think they look good together. But, yeah, we can just get on to transformation. So, yeah, first thing you want to do is take off all the accessories if you haven't already and put them off to the side. And we'll take the orange piece of the cannon and this piece, combine those together. We'll put that off to the side for right now. Then you want to take this stand right here and it folds up like that. And then these fold up and those will be the legs at some point. And then these pieces right here are kind of clipped into this piece, which will become the chest. So you start, well, actually, first you want to take these gray pieces and just untab them from these black pieces and just fold them out on that hinge just to loosen all that up. And then you can untab that purple section. One side just kind of loosely locks in there, which is fine because like all the other tabs hold it in place. And this side is a lot tighter. So yeah, you just take that. This was tabbed in right there. We just lift all that up on that armature. And this side can be a little bit trickier, but not too bad. There you go, just like that. Then you want to take this whole purple section starting right here and just loosen that up a little bit. So you can take this section, which will become the legs, and rotate that down. Then you want to take this section and just fold it to the back for now. Get these out of the way. And then this whole section with the barrel, sort of, you want to bring up. Then you want to take the silver bit on here, and this can be kind of tricky to untab, but you just want to loosen that up, fold it down, and then fold the chest up, and then fold this whole section with the chest and head included around. And before you lock that in, you have to like bring it so that this tab goes into there where it will be in robot mode. So it's kind of like you have to do that before you can lock this in place, and you have to lock that in place before you can bring this back and close. So yeah, and then you want to take the spike here and just fold it up like that to stick straight up. And then there's a peg right there that will just peg into the gun barrel right there. There's a double hinge in here, so you kind of have to get that oriented correctly and just peg it in like that. Let's adjust the camera here a little bit. And then these sections are just going to be side skirts, so you just fold them to the side there. And then you want to take this purple section, this tab will go in that slot right there. And then this section will tab into that section like that. And then you can adjust these shoulder pauldron things. Bring this down. The treads, it's on like a double hinge here. They want you to take this peg and peg it into the shoulder right there. But if you do that, that completely eliminates the bicep swivel. So I tend to just leave that unpegged and just have those kind of floating there. It's not too big a deal. Untab the lower arm from the upper arm, unfold the elbow, fold out the hands, and then do the same thing on this side. And just adjust all that. Then last but not least, the legs. You just want to untab them, take, rotate them forward, take these purple sections on the side, untab them, they're just on a double hinge there, and then fold it around so that that tab goes into that slot right there, so they just sit on the back of the legs, nice and clean. And then last but not least, just flip out the heels from underneath the feet. And yeah, there you have Galvatron in his base robot mode, and he looks pretty slick. I like him a lot. You know, there's a kind of running change that's been going with this guy because originally, like a lot of the first ones that were hitting stores had a misassembly error in the shoulders, where basically like the shoulders, the joint that they're attached to is offset, so it sits a little bit, you know, higher, but it rotates lower. So like other people's shoulders were sitting like that, but they still had this bit on the front. So it was sitting kind of low down like that, which does not look not look quite as good. Kind of annoying, actually. Wait. Doesn't look quite as good just with his shoulder line sitting a little bit lower. It's not like a huge deal, but I was happy that I was able to find one that had the correct shoulders, because the procedure for actually fixing that is like, from what I've seen of it, looks kind of scary. So that's something you want to keep in mind when looking for these guys. If you see him in the box and this part is what's facing forward, but it has this detail showing, like this detail, that's wrong. You want it to be this smooth section that fits with the contour. So if you're, you know, like that's pretty much the difference there. And I think that just looks proportionally so much better to have his shoulder line be that higher setting there. And yeah, obviously you can take his gun here, and it can peg onto his arm in a couple different places. Where you're really supposed to peg it on is right here. And you can see there's a little like notch cut out in that hole, so that this little notch right there on the gun slides into. The first few times I did this, the gun would just like work itself out of that joint, and it was kind of annoying. It's, for whatever reason, after, you know, a few times of doing it, kind of settled in there. But you know, that's really where it's supposed to be. But the one caveat to that is, you know, if you have his elbow bent, then the cannon is always facing a little bit backwards, just because it's perfectly parallel with the shoulder there. Whereas like if you peg it into the forearm here, you can't peg it in like fully, because then this bumps into that port, but it stays in there relatively well. But the cannon looks a little bit lower, but you know, if you bend his arm, then it actually goes with it. So at personal preference, I mean, I tend to leave it here, but I find myself always bumping it out of that joint just by like intuitively trying to like angle it to go with the arm, and then when you rotate it, it pushes it out of that joint, which can be a little bit annoying. But this is really how it's like supposed to be oriented. Articulation wise, his head is on a ball joint here, so good range of movement. Can wiggle back and forth a little bit. The shoulders, again, rotate like that, and like the rotation joint is actually like here, so like visually it looks like he's got that higher shoulder line, but you know, the actual shoulder is kind of lower, which I don't think messes with too many poses, but is worth keeping in mind. He's got a bicep swivel again, but if you peg in, you know, the treads there, then that blocks that, which kind of sucks. The treads themselves have this extra sort of angled rotation joint, and I'm not totally sure why, because I guess they just use it to angle the treads in vehicle mode, but it sort of seems, no, yeah, I guess that is what it's for. Never mind, ignore me. He's got a double jointed elbow, which is nice for transformation. Wrist swivels, which is nice. He's got a big waist cut. These flaps can kind of get out of the way, and then they have that separate extra joint for transformation. Additionally, though I don't know if it really needs it, this also can flap up, but like the legs kind of just move around that piece anyway, so I'm not sure why it needed that hinge, but whatever, it's got it. The legs can go up like that, go back about that far, go pretty much all the way out to the side. He's got a thigh swivel, about 90 degrees bend at the knee, maybe like a degree or two less, but that's fine. The feet have a good amount of tilt there. They can't really go forward and back. I mean, you can kind of tilt the heel forward, so if you want him to be like, you know, as if he's balancing on one toe, you can kind of like use that heel as a third leg to support that stance. But yeah, his feet don't actually tilt forward and back. But yeah, no, pretty good articulation. Looks pretty good. And we'll bring back on some of the other figures to show him off with. Here he is again with that standard size comparison of the Siege Sideswipe mold. So you can see how he stacks up there. Here he is again with Siege Megatron. So you can see a bit taller than him, as he should be. Let's bring on Cyclonus and Scourge again. I don't know why I keep saying Scourge. And as you can see, he looks pretty good with them. I mean, like, it does make Scourge look a little bit short compared to Cyclonus and Galvatron, and I would prefer he be the shortest of the three, but maybe it would have been nice if Scourge was a little bit taller or Cyclonus was a little bit shorter, just so that, you know, it was a little bit more symmetrical between the three of them, but I still feel like that works relatively well. Here he is with Rodimus Prime. Whoa, got all sorts of stuff falling over there. With Rodimus Prime. Here he is with Kingdom Ultra Magnus. So you can see how they stack up. They're pretty much the same height. He's maybe a little bit shorter than Magnus. And here he is with Earthrise Optimus Prime. So you can see, I think he's a pretty good height. Like, you know, obviously a lot of the leader class figures recently have been, you know, shorter than they have been in previous years. I think he scales really well. In terms of like the amount of plastic that he has, he's like a pretty weighty figure, actually. Like, having him in hand is like even more so than a lot of other leader class figures, even though he probably weighs about the same as Magnus, but he's a little bit less like thick as Magnus. So it's kind of like noticeable when I pick him up and I'm like, oh, this actually has like pretty good amount of weight to it. In terms of his other accessories, we can bring these on here. He can obviously, you know, hold his little revenge ship cannons in his hands like that as two different weapons, which, you know, looks fine. I feel like, you know, I'm probably not going to display him with these. They're cool accessories, but I'm happy with him just having his main cannon. And then, of course, you can plug them together. So he's got that bigger cannon, which, again, looks cool. Just, you know, the orange cannon is really the one that I associate him with. And then the Matrix accessory, it doesn't actually like tab in this mode. You pretty much just drape it over his neck. But, you know, that works pretty well, giving him that Matrix on a chain there. And yeah, in terms of this Matrix compared to the other ones, it doesn't like really totally fit in either Rodimus or Optimus's chest. Just like Optimus's Matrix, it feels like the handlebars are a little bit too small to get over these pieces in Rodimus's chest. So that doesn't really work. And then the ball in the middle is a little bit too thick for it to fit in Optimus's chest. So, I mean, whatever, like obviously, like it kind of fits in there, but then you can't totally like close his chest windows all the way. So, you know, whatever, like the accessories that came with these figures should just stay with the ones they came with. The blast effect that came with Rodimus Prime does work on it, so that still works. But yeah, you know, overall, I think he's a pretty solid figure. Like, if you can find one that have the good shoulders, then I feel like that he just looks so much better than with that lower shoulder line. Like, it just proportionally helps the look of him so much. The cannon not staying in totally tight is kind of annoying. I might see about like either like shaving down just these edges a little bit just so it doesn't tend to like push the piece out, and then maybe also thickening the peg so it stays in there a little bit more tightly, because I just find that, like, you know, you notice it while messing around with him, then you tend to just like push it out of the way and then it just like droops all over the place, which kind of sucks, because it's like you want that in particular to be a tight connection just because that's Galvatron's main cannon there. In terms of other pieces like that, this piece, like, I tend to bump this out of the way a lot because it doesn't really lock in super securely. If you want, you could just leave it on the back like that, but he really is supposed to have this, you know, the spike coming up like that. It's not the end of the world. Again, just kind of annoying. But other than that, like, the only other thing to mention is, like, yeah, he's got the battle damage stuff, which is like, after how much people complained about that for, you know, Siege, and then they scaled it way back in Earthrise, I was really surprised that they decided to include that on this guy, because, like, I think he'd just look objectively better without it. Like, he's got some, like, silver smears on the bottom of his shins down here, and that I don't mind. Like, that is, like, subdued enough, but, like, the color that they've chosen for, like, these scratch marks on his chest and his forearms is just, like, it's too far enough away from the purple that he is that it really pops in a way that's not great. I'm not a huge fan of that. Again, not the end of the world. It's definitely deal withable, but, like, I'd prefer it if it weren't there. People were also talking about how like he's not quite the right purple that he's supposed to be. Like he's definitely in the show like kind of more like this kind of purple, like Cyclonus. I feel like it does generally look better on him in person than it does on a lot of those shots. Like it definitely is a sort of like reddier purple as opposed to the like light bluish purple that he was in the show. It was really more kind of this color, like the color of his smudges here. But I feel like it works on him personally. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about this guy. Overall, he's a really solid figure, and I'm quite pleased with him, despite some few nitpicky type things. But yeah, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom Leader Class Galvatron.